He slapped the wrong woman and found out too late she outranked him. Have you ever seen something happen so fast, so raw, that for a moment your brain just pauses, as if it needs a second to catch up? That's what happened that Tuesday afternoon on Forest Avenue in Shreveport, Louisiana. It was hot mid-August. Folks were outside, windows down, some grabbing lunch from the corner food truck parked across from the quick stop. Traffic moved slow. People walked. Kids laughed. Music played from somebody's speaker nearby. Just regular life. Then the yelling started. "Hey, stop right there." A man's voice barked sharply. A few heads turned. The voice had the tone, not regular yelling, but authority yelling. Officer Brad Timons came stomping across the sidewalk like he owned the pavement. Short-cropped hair, mirrored sunglasses, hand twitching near his belt. One of those guys who always seemed to be hunting for a reason to be mad. The kind of cop who didn't ask questions before assuming the worst. Across from him stood a woman, tall, calm, dressed in jeans and a loose navy tee. No visible badge, no weapons, just a phone in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. She looked confused, like she didn't know who he was talking to, but she stopped. Brad didn't slow down. He closed the gap in seconds, boots loud against the concrete. "I said, stop," he repeated, louder now, stepping right into her space. "Let me see your hands." The woman raised both hands slowly, phone still in her grip. "Sir, I think you've got the wrong smack." Nobody saw it coming, not even her. The slap echoed louder than it should have. Groceries hit the ground. The phone flew from her hand. A bag of oranges rolled into the street. Gasps. Silence. Then murmurs. "What the hell did he just do? Did you see that?" She didn't do anything. Brad stood over her, chest puffed, still breathing heavy like he expected a fight. She held her cheek, still standing calm. Her eyes didn't well up. No screams, no insults, just a long, deliberate blink, like she was making a mental note. Then she crouched, picked up her phone without looking at him, gathered what groceries she could, and walked away. Brad didn't follow. He adjusted his sunglasses, mumbled something about non-compliance, and turned to walk back to his cruiser like nothing had happened. He didn't even write a report. Some people pulled out their phones. Others just stood there, frozen between shock and fear, not of her, but of him. A young man at the food truck muttered, "She's gonna sue the hell out of him." But the older woman beside him said, "Nah, she ain't gonna sue. That woman's about to do something way worse." And she was right. But nobody knew who she really was, not yet. That night, Forest Avenue was still talking. It didn't take long for someone to upload the clip, blurry, shaky, only a few seconds long, but it caught the moment perfectly. Her calm, his hand, the slap, the stillness after. No yelling, no threats, just that silent fury in her eyes. The video spread across group chats and Facebook feeds. Nobody knew her name, but people felt something in the way she walked off. It wasn't fear, it was control. Officer Timons, on the other hand, slept just fine, or at least pretended to. He wasn't worried. This wasn't the first time he'd been caught on video. Internal complaints never stuck to him. He had friends in the right places. His father had been a sergeant before retirement. Brad thought he was untouchable. Still, by morning, he was back at the precinct, sipping bad coffee and laughing with two other patrolmen about that one chick who thought she was slick. "Did you see her face?" He chuckled, feet kicked up. "She froze like a deer classic." They laughed, but not everyone was laughing. Detective Tay Saunders sat nearby, trying not to react. He knew something Brad didn't. That woman, he'd seen her before. Not recently, but enough to recognize the posture, the walk, the discipline. She wasn't just some random woman on the street. She was police. But not just police, she was internal affairs. Brad, oblivious, kept yapping. "You know what? Maybe I did her a favor. Could have cuffed her. Could have taken her in. I let her walk." That's when Captain Denise Harper came in through the glass doors like a gust of wind, short, no nonsense, always in uniform before sunrise. "Timons," she called sharply. He straightened. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't answer, just kept walking. "Briefing room. Now." Brad smirked and followed, still convinced he was in the clear. No adrenaline. No second thoughts. But across the city, in a quiet kitchen in South Highlands, Sergeant Nyla Freeman was pinning her badge to her pressed navy blouse. She wasn't in a rush. Everything about her movements was precise. Her cheek was still slightly red, not from the pain. She barely felt that. It was the principle. The disrespect. The way people just let it happen, like she was invisible. Like her rank didn't matter without a uniform. She took one last look in the mirror, not at the bruise, but at her eyes. Then she picked up her file, her keys, and walked out the door. By 8:15 a.m., she was standing in front of the precinct, the same precinct Brad worked in. Her badge clipped high, blazer crisp. She didn't knock. She walked in like she owned the building. Every conversation in the lobby stopped. She didn't yell or announce herself, she just moved forward, eyes straight ahead, heading to the Internal Affairs office like it was any other day. But it wasn't. It was the start of a storm. Brad had no idea that the woman he slapped had just walked back into his world, fully armed with the truth. The precinct's energy shifted the second she stepped inside. You could feel it, not in the air, but in the silence that followed her like a shadow. Phones stopped ringing. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Everyone knew that walk. Straight back, slow steps, zero hesitation. Internal Affairs Sergeant Nyla Freeman. She didn't speak as she entered. She didn't need to. Her presence said everything. A young desk officer, barely 6 months into the job, stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his coffee. "Ma'am, can I help you?" She glanced at his nameplate. "You can tell Captain Harper I'm here." "Yes, ma'am." He fumbled for the phone. By the time the line connected, the captain was already stepping out of her office, her heels echoing down the corridor. "Freeman," she said, voice level. "I saw the video." Nyla nodded once. "We need to talk." They disappeared into the captain's office without another word. Meanwhile, across the station, Brad Timance was gearing up for patrol, still full of swagger, still running his mouth. He hadn't seen her yet. He was leaning against the locker, cracking jokes with Officer Jalen Ruiz, who didn't laugh once. "You good?" Brad asked. Ruiz hesitated. "You don't know, do you?" Brad raised an eyebrow. "No." "What?" Before he could get an answer, Captain Harper's voice came through the loudspeaker. "Officer Timance, report to my office." Now. That wiped the grin off his face. He grabbed his belt and walked out, shoulders squared, confused but not nervous, at least not yet. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Quiet. The kind of quiet that meant people were watching, just not saying. He opened the captain's door and stepped inside. That's when it hit him. She was sitting there, not in jeans, not with groceries, not with her phone out, in uniform, rank on display, paperwork spread in front of her like weapons. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Captain Harper didn't give him a second to think. "Close the door." He did. She leaned forward. "Officer Timance, this is Sergeant Nyla Freeman, Internal Affairs." Brad blinked. "Wait. What?" Nyla didn't flinch. "You hit me yesterday." Silence. "You approached without cause," she continued. "You failed to identify yourself, used excessive force, and walked away without a report." She slid a document across the desk. "This is your formal notification of review. You are being investigated for misconduct, excessive use of force, and failure to report an incident involving a civilian, or, in this case, a fellow officer." Brad's face twitched. "Hold on. I didn't know you were." "That's the problem," Nyla said, sharp and cold. "You didn't ask." Captain Harper looked like she'd aged 5 years since the conversation started. "You will be placed on administrative leave effective immediately, pending the outcome of this investigation." Brad's hands clenched. "I've been on this job for 10 years. That's exactly why this should have never happened," Nyla said, standing now. Voice calm but firm. "Because someone with your experience should have known better." He stared at her, no longer angry, just stunned. The room felt too small, too bright. "How many others, Timance?" she asked, not breaking eye contact. "How many people did you treat like that and get away with it?" He didn't answer. She didn't wait. She walked out, documents in hand, expression unchanged. The hallway was even quieter than before. Everyone saw her. Everyone knew. And for once, Brad Timance wasn't the loudest man in the room. But what he didn't know, and what nobody in that hallway knew yet, was that this investigation would dig deeper than anyone expected. Internal Affairs doesn't move fast. It moves quietly. While most officers thought Nyla's investigation would be a formality, maybe a few days of desk duty for Brad, some paperwork, then back to business, what they didn't realize was Nyla wasn't looking at just one incident. She was looking at a pattern. By Wednesday afternoon, she had access to body cam logs, disciplinary records, complaint reports, dash cam footage, years of it. And the deeper she dug, the worse it got. One complaint from a young black man. 3 years ago, Officer Timance yanked me out of my car without explaining why. Didn't even say a word. Another complaint, filed by a local nurse. He kept his hand on his gun the entire time he questioned me, right in front of my kids. There was a 17-year-old girl who said he made her sit on the sidewalk for 20 minutes while he ran her name, even though she wasn't the driver. No body cam footage was ever submitted. Gone. Brad had a trail, the kind that gets swept under the rug because nobody has the time or the guts to pull it out into the light. Until now. One by one, Nyla called in witnesses. First up was Detective Saunders. He sat across from her, arms crossed, trying to stay neutral, but he'd seen things. Heard things. You knew, she said simply. I suspected, he replied, but Brad had the right friends. The right timing. You speak up, you get iced out. You know how it works. I do, she said, but we're not letting that stop us anymore. Next came Officer Ruiz. Then the nurse. Then 2 more civilians. One by one, the pieces came together. Meanwhile, Brad sat in his apartment, pacing. He wasn't allowed back in the precinct. No badge. No weapon. Just his ego, and a growing sense that this wasn't going to blow over. He tried calling Harper. No response. He texted one of his old training buddies, got left on read. Even his father, retired Sergeant Walter Timance, told him flatly, you should have kept your hands to yourself. The walls were closing in. By Friday, the internal report Nyla had started was over 30 pages long, but she wasn't stopping there. She called in Lieutenant Grace Hollow from Baton Rouge, a no-nonsense internal affairs veteran with a history of taking down dirty cops from the inside. Together, they reviewed the use of force logs. Brad had been flagged 6 times in the past 2 years alone. 6. How had nobody acted? Simple. People got comfortable. Comfortable looking the other way. Comfortable believing aggression meant effectiveness. That attitude got sold as leadership. But leadership doesn't leave bruises. By now, word had spread across the station. Officers who once laughed at Brad's story started keeping their distance. The silence wasn't just awkward, it was loud, and it was growing. In one of the side offices, a rookie leaned toward her partner and whispered, you think she'll actually get him fired? Her partner shook his head. She's not just trying to fire him. She's about to gut this whole place. But what they didn't know yet was that the most damning piece of evidence hadn't even surfaced. Not yet. It was Saturday when the flash drive arrived. No name. No note. Just an unmarked envelope slipped under the internal affairs door sometime after hours. Nyla found it early the next morning when she came in to finalize her report. She picked it up, held it for a second, then slid it into her laptop. The folder inside was labeled Locker 38 Timance. She clicked. It was all there, videos, photos, cell phone footage, body cam clips that had somehow never made it to official logs. Then one file labeled Civic Center 2021. She clicked play. The screen lit up with dash cam footage. Brad's voice, calm at first, a routine stop. But the tone shifted quickly. Aggression, threats, a teenager's voice trembling, asking to call his mom. Then the sound of something hitting metal hard. The kid never filed a complaint. Never followed up. But someone was there that day. Someone had seen it. Someone had kept a copy. That footage had been buried for almost 4 years. And now, it was in her hands. Nyla leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. It wasn't just about Brad anymore. It was about who helped protect him, who looked the other way, who decided silence was easier than accountability. She copied the contents and placed the drive in the evidence locker under sealed chain of custody. Then she called Captain Harper. I need to speak to the review board, she said. Today, Harper didn't argue. By noon, word had spread again, this time further than the precinct. An emergency meeting had been called. Brad was notified and told to appear. He arrived late, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. His usual swagger was gone. The room was full, Captain Harper, the review board, 2 city attorneys, and Nyla sitting at the end of the table with the flash drive in front of her like a loaded weapon. Brad looked around. This ain't protocol, he said. Nyla didn't flinch. Neither is hiding evidence. You're not here to argue process, Officer Timance. You're here to respond to facts. He tried to talk fast, spin it like everything was exaggerated, misunderstood politics. But nobody was listening anymore. Nyla plugged in the drive and played the footage. The room fell silent, not just because of what they saw, but because it wasn't just that one clip. There were 7 more. Each one worse than the last. Those last moments told a story no one had wanted to say out loud. When it ended, Brad just sat there. No words. No arguments. Just silence. Then Lieutenant Hollow spoke. This is a pattern of behavior. Targeted, abusive, and protected by a lack of oversight. She turned to Harper. We're recommending full termination, loss of pension, and referral to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. Brad looked like he'd been slapped again, only this time, by the system he thought worked for him. He stood up, mouth open, but no sound came out. Harper didn't look at him. She just nodded to the officers at the back. They approached quietly, respectfully. Bradley Timance, you are hereby suspended without pay, pending termination and criminal investigation. Please surrender your badge and department-issued credentials. He hesitated, but the fight was gone. He reached into his coat, pulled out his badge, and laid it on the table. It didn't shine like it used to. Nyla watched him walk out. No hate in her eyes. No revenge. Just the kind of peace that comes when truth finally speaks louder than fear. But the real change wasn't in Brad walking out. It was in the officers who stayed behind, realizing silence was no longer an option. 2 weeks later, the precinct walls looked different. Not because of new paint or announcements, but because of a shift in how people looked at each other. For the first time in years, officers weren't just talking, they were listening. Watching what they said, how they said it. Thinking twice before brushing something off. The silence that used to protect people like Brad cracked. And it cracked because someone had the nerve to walk back in with her badge and remind everyone what the job was supposed to be about. Brad Timance didn't show up to his termination hearing. His lawyer did, but he couldn't argue against the mountain of evidence. His badge was revoked. His pension denied. The district attorney had already opened a formal investigation. Civil suits were likely on the way. Some called it justice. Some called it overdue. Brad called it betrayal. He sat in his apartment, blinds drawn, alone. His phone buzzed, but he stopped answering days ago. The same people who once patted him on the back now wanted nothing to do with him. He stared at the TV, watching news coverage of the case, his case. Not one person defended him. A knock came at the door. He didn't move at first, then reluctantly opened it. Captain Denise Harper stood there in plain clothes, not as a captain, just a person. I don't know why you came, he muttered. Because I want to be able to look my people in the eye and say I at least tried. To say this to your face. He didn't respond. You embarrassed the badge, she said, voice low. And worse, you made it harder for good cops to do their job. Every time you abused your power, you made someone else less safe. I let you stay too long. Brad swallowed, but said nothing. Harper turned to leave, then stopped. She gave you mercy when she could have given you war. Think about that. Then she was gone. Back at the precinct, Nyla stood alone in the briefing room. Her case was done, but her mission wasn't, not even close. She looked over the names of 2 new officers requesting transfers into internal affairs. Young, smart, quiet, watching everything. She smiled. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding the system that people like Brad can only exist when good folks stay silent. She closed the file, then walked outside into the Louisiana sun. Her badge glinted in the light, not because it made her powerful, but because she carried it with purpose. The real victory wasn't in Brad losing everything. It was in everyone else finally gaining the courage to protect what mattered. Some people wear the badge like a weapon. Others wear it like armor. But the ones who wear it with integrity carry the weight. Not just of the law, but of every single person who's ever been stepped on, overlooked, or silenced. Sergeant Nyla Freeman didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw fists. She walked back through the same doors where she was humiliated, with her head held high and her badge clean. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. That's the kind of power that lasts. So the next time someone tells you silence is easier, remember this story. Because real justice doesn't always come in sirens and lawsuits. Sometimes, it walks in wearing the same uniform, but with a different heart. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, recognition, don't scroll past. Speak up. Share it. And most of all, remember, respect isn't optional when you wear the badge.